Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Seasons Ebb and Flow. I am Lee Wright. I'm a divorce coach, and I am interviewing Jennifer Lee again for the second time. She is a wealth manager, financial planner, and she works with people who are going through divorce, post-divorce, getting ready to rebuild, among other clients as well, obviously. And I wanted to talk to her just again, but going a little deeper into what people should be thinking about as they are coming out of divorce and thinking about rebuilding financially, recognizing that it definitely takes some time. So I'll just let Jennifer talk a little bit about her thoughts with that to begin with.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Lee. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be on the call with you. Transitions are hard. Having a two income household and then having to take those resources that you had collectively, split them in half, and then move on can be a major adjustment. If there aren't significant assets, your lifestyle may change and you may find yourself a little bit at ground zero again. So, it's a really good time to take inventory of what you have and inventory of what you want your future to look like. And then we can really create a plan to move you forward to either save more money, invest more efficiently, change your housing situation so that you have a better cash flow for yourself and your kids and your family. And really just everybody's different. Everybody's situation is a little bit different and it can be overwhelming. Going through divorce, transitions are hard. So that's what we're here for on the financial side, is to help you see your options as we move into the next phase of our lives.
Yes, yeah. And I think that I talk to my clients about the fact that it is going to be a few years until you feel like you're really back on your feet financially. In the beginning, you're figuring out a new budget, adjusting to probably having to change your lifestyle to some degree, and but reminding yourself this is a period of time and you will get back financially to a place that you feel more comfortable and solid, but recognizing that there will be some grieving and frustration and sadness. Those are all normal emotions as you go through this hard transition for sure.
No question, no question. And you need that support of the team. You need the attorney to help you with the legal components. You need the financial person to walk you through, what's reality and what you can do and how do we tweak things so that it can be tolerable as you get to that next phase. And then you need you to hold the hand all the way through that and shift your thinking. And it does take a team.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for people who are coming out of a divorce, like what are some things that they should be thinking about as they start to get started? Like what are, if they're like, "Oh my gosh, okay, I have a settlement, but and what next? What do I do?"
Yeah, it depends on where you are in your either in your financial education and in terms of your assets and your resources. So it's always a good time when a big change happens, whether it's death, divorce, um, moving to a new location, buying or selling a business, these big changes, you need to take inventory, right?
Mhm.
So we need to assess, what are those resources? What's the income? What's the assets? What are the resources you have at your disposal? And then
Mhm.
what do you want? What do you want your life to look like? Are you going to work part-time? Do you want to go back to school? Can you stay in the family home? Does that make sense? And evaluate what that looks like. Are you going to move to another state? Will you have a side hustle? I don't know. You have to tell me what you want and what you have, and then we can help you make that as efficient as possible. And
Yeah.
then it's just like financial planning 101. We have to start with the basics. It's almost like sometimes when you go through divorce, you're rebooting. You have to start over again in terms of building your foundation. So
Mhm.
you want to make sure you have emergency money to protect your family, a safe and nice place to live. That
Mhm.
doesn't make you house poor.
Yes.
Um, and then you go to the next level. And if you have a job, you want to get your free money, a match if you have a 401k or a 403b at work, and they give you dollar for dollar match. That makes me nuts if you don't take your good money, your free money, right? This is free to you.
Yeah.
Your employer is encouraging you to save money. So we want to consider that. If you're eligible, then you want to think about things like a Roth IRA and so on. It goes on. It's building blocks, right?
Right. Right.
I like to say when you're a little kid or playing with a little kid, a 2-year-old, and you stack blocks, they just knock it right over, right? Well, we want to build as much of a solid foundation at the base that you can truly build. So it might take a little bit of time
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
start over.
I listened to a lot of podcasts lately about like the idea of building wealth versus just saving, so that you're thinking your perspective is like, how do I create things that will maybe provide passive income or that are creating wealth on their own eventually? And it's a very different mindset or thought process than just, okay, I'm saving 10% of my income or something.
Sure. Well, that's a very valid point. So again, talking about levels of sophistication, oftentimes people, the people that we tend to work with happen to be what I call the non-moneyed party. So their historic experience or their role in their relationship was not to handle that portion. In relationships, we often divide and conquer. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes you may be in charge of the money and in charge of everything, and that's great. Now we need to shift the mindset to how do I create other streams of income? But the first piece is getting you to have a solid foundation and a comfort level to be able to talk about money, right? And what it can do for you. When we traditionally in this industry talk about saving money and putting it aside, I like to use the analogy of building a machine. So when you're saving 10% of your income, you're putting little bits of money over here and you're buying sheet metal and nuts and bolts. And if you put a little bit away, you build a tiny little machine. The more you put away, the bigger, and so on. And the idea is when you retire, when you need that to generate income, you turn off the light switch at work, you go home and you flip on the machine, and the machine kicks out income. Okay.
Mhm.
So if you're not tapping into the machine, but you're just getting what it generates, that's a form of generating income. So that's one piece.
Mhm.
If you get a little bit more in depth or a little bit more creative, like you're suggesting, shift your mindset. So do you buy real estate and invest in real estate so you have renters and you have income and somebody else is a similar idea. Somebody
Yeah.
else is paying for that machine. Okay.
Mhm.
And 20, 30 years from now, in theory, that machine is paid off and now it just generates income. Okay, you just have to
Yes.
fix it, you gotta pay taxes, those kind of things.
Right.
That is a way. Um, Other things, traditional investments would involve, dividend stocks, or it might involve bonds that pay a rate of return,
Mhm.
rather than just putting your money in a savings account.
Right.
Now, lots of people have tons of money in cash in savings accounts these days because interest rates have been so high in the last couple of years, which is
Right.
fantastic. I mean, if you could get 5.5% at your bank, take it all day long because there's no risk, right?
Yes.
Those numbers are coming down. And so, you have to be mindful of how that's impacting, your interest rate and so on.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think another interesting thing that I kind of struggle with that I'm working through myself is the I worry about my future self. And so, like, sometimes don't let myself spend money right now, or I have like this internal conflict if I'm going to go shopping, which I don't do very often, or consider like upgrading my car, which is really old, and I just keep putting off upgrading it because I'm like, it's paid off, insurance is low, I don't drive that much. And so finding that balance, and it's more of an emotional mental thought process, I guess, of like, how much do I need to be cautious and save and think about building wealth versus how much do I like, am I stopping myself from having joy in current day, you know?
Yeah, I think I would venture to say that you're more of a minority than a majority. Okay, most
Right.
people have trouble with impulse control about spending today and not worrying about tomorrow.
Interesting.
So let me address that first, and then I'm going to go back so we can make you more comfortable with your cash flow and that you can do things. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not a believer in poverty consciousness, or you can't have things. If I let's say, for example, there's something that I would like to have and my current cash flow doesn't allow for it, I'm going to think about a way that I can either make more revenue or have a side hustle to allow me to do that,
Right.
or reduce an expense that trade an expense, like you talked about
Yes.
your car, right? So if I get a new car, it's going to be a $500 a month car payment. What could I do with that $500? Well, I could save $300 in a Roth IRA for retirement. I could put $200 away for a trip.
Mm,
It's an exchange. We have an exchange.
yes.
We have choices, right?
Yes.
So it's a matter of being conscious about your choices. And I like to say, once you know too much, you can't make that poor decision without having it in your mental mindset. So it's important to understand what your discretionary number is, what you have on a monthly basis at your discretion. You get to choose. Do you go to Costco? Do you buy a new car? Do you buy a new couch? Do you have a Starbucks edition of shoe fetish? Whatever it is, we all have
Right.
something that
Yes,
we
it's true.
like,
Yeah.
wine, whatever it is. But we have choices. So if you know what your income coming in is and your fixed expenses, the things you need to take care of for your healthcare, um, your car payment, your cell phone bill, your kids, whatever expenses, those things. You know what those expenses are. There's a number at the bottom of that little exercise that is at your discretion. And you get to choose. What are you going to do with it? Oh, I'm going to take the kids to, you live in the Orlando area. I'm going to take the kids to Disney World this weekend. Well, that's going to blow your budget for the month, right?
Yeah.
So, but you could save up for that. You could
Mm,
say, hey, the kids really love this. And it makes me feel so good to be able to give this to them. So I'm going to save $100 a month toward that
mm,
goal. And I think that's where we lack the ability to, it's in the planning.
yes.
It's in the thinking about, what do I want? Right?
Yes, absolutely. So what I work with my clients post divorce is a lot of times like, what are the priorities and values? Like for me, I love travel. And if I don't travel a few times a year, sometimes small trips, sometimes big trips, traveling with my kids, I like exploring the world with them and showing them there's so much out there. So I have chosen that in order to travel, that means I stick with my old car and I don't get my nails done. And those things would be nice, but they aren't as high on my priority list and values as travel. But I think it's really healthy for people to take a step back and say, what is most important to me? And especially this phase of life, like maybe uh, when your kids are little, it's going to be spending more money on their activities, but that will change as they grow up and go to college or post college, maybe, where
Yeah.
you have more money to spend on things for you. Or so, phase of life, those are things as well.
It is true. And I mean, depending on when you're in your divorce process, you may have, if you're divorced in your 40s, it's still very, very expensive, right? If you're divorcing in your late 50s, the kids are theoretically out of the house for the most part, except for, can I have some money because I ran my credit card bill up, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. But during that 50 to 65, that's what I call crunch time, right? That's where you're like, oh my gosh, I I have to get serious about this. I should have been saving all along. I have to
Yeah.
get real about retirement. I'm making the most money I've ever made, right? In
Hmm.
most cases, you're making the most money. So what do you do with those resources rather than say, "Oh, I got a whole bunch of extra cash in my pocket. How am
Right.
I putting that to work for my future self?" Right?
Yes.
What are my goals? What are my plans? And how do I make my assets more efficient?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with side gigs, like for me, like during my divorce, I wasn't getting very much money from my ex, and rather than having a temporary hearing, I just needed to get to mediation. And so sometimes I would Airbnb my house, and me and my kids would go stay at my friend's house because I was just pretty desperate for cash at that time. But ever since then, like if we travel, I'll sometimes rent out my house, which I know a lot of people aren't comfortable with, but it's worked for me. And I kind of started to explore all different ways to try and use my assets. Like there's two websites, Peerspace and Gigster, where you can rent out your house to film crews and stuff. And so I do little things like that here and there. And sometimes I watch dogs just to supplement my income with this business. And I teach yoga on the side. And so, if you don't have a traditional job, which I'm not saying one is better than the other, because being an entrepreneur is challenging
It's
and
a whole different
stressful,
thing.
and sometimes you feel like you probably work more, or just the guilt of feeling like you should be working all the time is a completely different challenge than people who have a more traditional 9 to 5 job. But yeah, in order for me to be around for my kids while they've been home, I do a lot of creative financial income streams. And but I think if you have a traditional job, there's no harm in thinking about little side gigs that could provide additional income.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it all boils down to knowing what your values are, which you talked about earlier. What is it that you want? Like life is about choices.
Mm.
Somebody might say, "Well, gosh, I feel uncomfortable having people in my home." Well, look, you're going to be away for 2 weeks, or you're going to stay at your friend's house for 2 weeks. That's a significant amount of money that could what? Contribute to your kids, contribute to you. It might be worth it. There's also Turo, which is a car rental,
Yes,
right? You could
yes,
also side hustle your car while you're on
yes,
that same trip. Um,
exactly.
when I travel, I use Turo.
I do too. I
I
love
like it.
it.
I mean, so it's an odd concept, 10 years ago, but it's new and it's hip. It's a decent idea. And
Yeah.
there's lots of things you can do. So it's either, I like to say, you know, there's only two ways to really get ahead financially. Okay. You either have to make more money or you have to spend less.
Hmm.
It's not that complicated,
Right.
right? If you're
True.
unwilling to do both, I can't move you. You're
Yes.
just like a mule, feet embedded. There's no carrot, there's no stick. So
Right.
that's our and then I refer people to you and say, I can't motivate, they're stuck, right?
Right.
And that happens.
Hmm.
Oftentimes because you're scared, oftentimes because you don't have the knowledge. It's new and but it's a new territory.
Hmm.
But I think it doesn't have to be scary. We can help get you on a path and make decisions that'll be healthy and supportive of your family and your values.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, it also comes down to like risk tolerance as well. Like, someone who maybe has less risk tolerance does better with investing in the stock market conservatively. And then I am definitely a little less risk tolerant, or like have more. Like,
More
for
tolerance.
example, yeah, my studio, I had this like old garage in my backyard that I was teaching yoga in, making very little money. And then I decided I was going to refinance my house, take a little money out, and put a kitchen and bathroom in there and turn it into a rental. And I had an estimate of like how much I had to do it, and it cost so much more. And so I ended up having to put a whole bunch of money on credit cards, but I got all these zero APRs, and I'm moving money around constantly for a period of time to like get me through. And I definitely stretched myself. Like, probably, I took on that project without having enough money to really do it, and luckily I figured out ways to get it done. But I think that it is important for people to like maybe push themselves out of their comfort zone a little bit sometimes in order for like wealth building down the road.
So, so I agree and disagree a little bit. Yeah, I think
Yes.
the average person would not have made it through to the other side as easily as you did.
Mm,
Okay, not that it was easy, because
yeah,
you
sure.
you you facilitated yourself through that, and you had to have that endurance and that push. And okay, well, what am I going to do? Let me solve this problem by getting credit cards. And the average person would not have either thought of those things, or would have been so overwhelmed they would have been
Yeah.
sitting,
Yeah, it was stressful. There's no doubt.
no doubt. Um, so as a financial person, if you had come to me and told me that that's what you were going to do, I would have wanted to talk through that process with you, and the numbers and what the
Yes.
risks were. Now I'm similar to you. I'm an entrepreneur, so I would have done what you did. Okay.
Right.
I mean, I like the risk factor. I like the side hustle. I do take risks, and I've paid for them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same.
Dearly, at
Mm-hmm.
times.
Yes.
And on the other hand, I've made good amounts of money in risky investments. The thing about real estate, and I'll just speak generally, real estate, excuse me, real estate is an illiquid investment. So what do I mean by that? I mean that you can't easily say, "Hey, Jennifer, I want to sell my property, and we're going to take that cash and do something else. Can
Mm-hmm.
you liquidate that today and give me the money?"
Right.
Right? Well, we can get a realtor, we can get an estimate, we can remove all your personal things, we can list your property for what you think it's worth, and then have to reduce the price, and it might take 2 months. That's illiquid, right? What if
Yeah.
what if the real estate market is down when you need to get into it? So for many investors, real estate investing is a nice to have, and maybe maybe the third step, in the third level, if you will, in
Okay.
terms of your financial building blocks. I talked a little bit about building blocks. If you don't mind, I'm going to share that one screen.
Yeah, totally.
Um, so financial building blocks, I always talk about, when you're playing with a little kid, they build the blocks straight up, and then they knock them over, and it falls over rather easily. Well, we want this foundation to be to be sizable. So I talked a little bit about, term insurance, a will, emergency money, having a nice place to live, and knowing what your cash flow or your discretionary number is monthly.
Mm,
This is really the baseline where everybody needs to have a grip on their financial picture. And then
yeah.
from there, I mentioned getting your free money, matching at work, Roth IRA. This is 529 plans, education plans for
Yeah.
kids, taxable investments, adding more money to your retirement plan. And then we go up from there. So I would think of, in my mind, I think of real estate on this level,
I
maybe a
see.
little bit on this level too.
Sure.
Um, before you fully fund your retirement, if you did your Roth and you got your free money and you had some emergency money, I'd be okay with you thinking about buying an investment property.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody is different. I know that you have, in your situation, somebody in your life who has a skill set in building homes, right?
Mhm.
You are more uniquely capable than I am because I don't have that, right?
Yeah,
So you have somebody who could go in there and go, oh yeah, we can rip out this wall and that's not load bearing and boom, 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 and it'll cost about
right.
this, and right? So that's an advantage over the average person who doesn't. So all investing, whether it be um, stocks, bonds, or just putting it in cash. That's not really an investment, but it's a savings vehicle.
Sure.
And real estate, starting a business, all of those have different levels of risk.
Mhm.
And not
Yeah.
everybody is capable of sustaining that risk for a period of time.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned starting a business. Like, what is your take on that as far as risk? Since the statistic, a lot of new businesses don't actually make it, and you're spending money that you don't know. For one, it at least a lot of times takes a few years to really become profitable.
I think if we're looking at a risk spectrum, it's pretty far on the high risk side.
Yeah.
Um, it also depends on, you have to have staying power in any of these things. You have to have a staying power of 5 to 7 year period, right?
Hmm.
And in order, so let's say, for example, and I know somebody specifically, she was making a good income in her 50s, making $150,000, decided that it would, she saw this shiny object over here, right? Oh, it's a franchise. I can buy into the franchise. It'll be more fun than my stressful corporate job.
Right.
I'm gonna I'm gonna buy into this franchise and I'll make money on that.
Yes.
Well, 5 years later, she spent all this money, it's stuck there, she's working crazy hours, and she might be making 60,000. Okay,
Right.
so that doesn't compute from a financial perspective. She
Yeah.
lost, we were in crunch time, she was making $150. So she lost 5 years of $150,000, spent money, and now is making 60 grand. That
Wow.
doesn't work. So starting a business with your specific skill set, or a partner business to what you've already been doing, is potentially a great idea.
Right.
Just going and starting a business that you have no experiential connection to, I think is at the far end of risky.
Yeah, that makes a
Oh,
lot of sense.
yeah, and
Um,
people, I'm sorry, your listeners are either going to be entrepreneurial in nature, or they're going to be employee oriented and more conservative in nature for the most part.
yes,
So my book is called Squeeze the Juice. So we can squeeze the juice out of whatever scenario you have. We're going to make it more efficient.
yes,
Um, First, let's get clear, get it more efficient, and then you want to take risk. Let's talk about what's a calculated risk that's appropriate for you.
right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And the example that you gave is, yeah, that would be really frustrating if you're 5 years down the road and you're making less and working more. It's hard.
That's not fun.
No.
No.
I saw on your diagram on the bottom left, it said love letter. What is that?
Um, so love letter is a supplement. It's not a legal document. It's a supplement to your wills and your legal documents. Some of us have multiple children in our lives, family members that you might want to include or exclude from your assets upon your death. So you might want to communicate what things are going to whom and why. Right.
Yeah.
So writing your love letter is talking to the people who are important to you about what your values are, um, what if you're gifting them things, through your will, why and what you expect of them.
Huh.
And it can be very specific about what you'd like to have happen. Mine says, please don't have this, sorrowful event. have a couple of different people making food and have good wine.
Yeah.
I want a celebration of life,
Yeah.
not not this really sad thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a matter of communicating what you want and what your values are and what's important to you. Mine also talks about my spouse is the non-moneyed party. It says don't spend the machine, right? You can
Mhm.
spend the earnings on the machine.
Right.
We don't have any kids, so I've got 9 nieces and nephews. It says teach them to fish. Don't give them money to buy a business. Give them money to get educated and be able to do those things. Give them money if they want to travel with you. Things that we would have done anyway,
Yes.
are in my value system. So
Yes.
writing your love letter is really, I think, a very sweet and generous way to communicate who you are and
Mm.
to the people who are left behind.
Yeah, I love that. That's really not something I had thought of. I did my will a few years ago because I had to have heart surgery, which
Oh
sounded
my,
really scary. It ended up it was intense, but it worked out. I was fine after a recovery period, but that forced me to create my will. And
yeah.
but I never had heard of a love letter. I think I'm gonna add that to it, actually.
It's Lee, it's a very, my dad got diagnosed with a brain tumor, and he was an advisor as well. He was a planner, but he was a yellow legal pad guy, and so
Mhm.
as such, I have like yellow legal pads all over my office. But so he delivered his family love letter in person. He didn't really know that he was doing it per se, but
um,
he had a family meeting at 6 a.m. on on all my siblings and my mom and I, and he told us who influenced his life, who he wanted to speak at his funeral, who he
wow.
wanted to sing at his funeral, and what he wanted her to sing. Um, he told us that my mother was never to pick up a Visa card when we were out to dinner. Um, he shared, he talked to us about his values. He talked to us about having loved his job and enjoyed the grandchildren and all these things. And he traveled, and I mean, it was intense.
Wow. Yeah.
And I have a note that's at my home office on my desk, and it's 3 sentences, right? It's a personal note from him to me, and that's important, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's probably the most valuable thing you could leave to your kids is
Yeah. That's
communication with them about
beautiful.
what you think of them and what joy they bring. And if they're younger, it's also about what you hope for them, what
Yeah.
your hopes are for them in marriage and contributing to the community in work and values.
Mm, hmm. That's really nice. Yeah, I think it's nice to take the time to do that. And I guess you have to periodically update it because hopefully you keep living longer and
Sure.
yeah,
Well, I mean, hopefully you keep living longer, but honestly, if you just get the first one down on paper, I think that's really significant because you have a
yeah,
couple kids, right?
yeah, I have two.
Okay, so I use this, and this will probably incite you to do this, but I like to say, if this were the last conversation, you had to call
Mm,
up one of your kids and tell them everything they need to know,
mm, hmm,
right? What would you
yes,
say? Like that's it right there.
yeah,
I'm gonna tell them
yes,
this is there's some stuff.
yeah,
So just write it down on a quick piece of paper so you have an outline for
mm-hmm,
each of them, and then you can go in and flesh it out.
right,
But
right.
boom, they need to know this, they need to know that, and here's how I feel about the boyfriend that you have, and but
Yeah, okay. I like that. I'm gonna put that on my list of high priorities.
yeah, just frame it out. It'll grow from there.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure. Can
Okay.
take on a life of its own. All right. I think we've covered a lot of what I had thought I would ask you. Um, I guess when one last question maybe, when people seek out like a financial advisor post-divorce, like what are some things they should be thinking about when they're looking for someone?
Well, I think, I met a young couple, new neighbors of ours last night, and she was telling me how she's always known the family advisor for years, and now she's seeing somebody in the office because they're younger and they don't have assets. And I said, that's fantastic. As long as you know, like, and trust the person, and
Hmm.
you have an understanding that they know what your story is and what your values are and what your goals are.
Hmm.
That's the most important part.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, I definitely recommend asking friends. You can listen to podcasts, you can get referrals from professionals. That's definitely a good way to start, but you
Yeah.
should have a couple conversations with different people.
Yeah.
And you want to ask about their approach. You want to ask about how they're licensed. So some people are just insurance licensed and they can only use 3 products. Other
Okay.
people are securities insurance license and they have the whole world at their disposal. Um, some people are brand new in the business. Some people have been around the block. I've been around the block 28 times or so. And really learned from a little kid because my dad was in the business. But I think most important, it's a matter of do your values match with that person? And
Mm.
it doesn't matter to me what you want to do with your assets. My job is to understand you, right? And
Yes.
understand what your goals are and help you navigate potholes that you might accidentally fall into. So as long as I let you know, hey, it's right there, if you want to go, chances are you're going to fall in it, but here's what we can do to try to navigate around it. That's what our job is. So um,
Mm.
definitely interview more than one person. And if something doesn't feel right, don't go there
Yeah. Yeah. Trust your gut.
for sure.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate your time. I think this has been very helpful and inspiring for people to recognize that they can be empowered. And even if it's scary, taking the reins and feeling like you have some control is better than the deer in headlights and or
Absolutely.
ostrich not wanting to even look at it. So,
Yeah. Unfortunately, when you go through divorce, you're forced to address it.
mhm,
So that's exciting for me as an advisor because I always want people to have their eyes open. But it's not as scary as you think.
yeah,
I guess that's really the message.
yeah, so
Take the
true.
first step.
Yes, yes. All right. Well, it was great talking to you, and maybe we'll do this again.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Lee.
You're welcome.